The message arrived on a Tuesday morning while Alex Rivers was fixing his broken coffee machine with a bent paperclip. The holographic display flickered to life in his cramped apartment, showing a towering alien figure with scales that shimmered like oil on water. Alex had seen plenty of strange things during his 15 years in the military, but talking to actual aliens still felt surreal. "Greetings, representative of the human species," the alien said in perfect English, though his mouth moved wrong for the words. "I am Ambassador Thane of the Korathi Empire. Your species has been selected for the Great Trial." Alex set down his paperclip and gave the hologram his full attention. The Great Trial was something every human had heard about since first contact. 3 months ago. It was the test that determined whether a species could join the Galactic Council as equals or remain under protective custody like children. "The trial will take place in 7 days aboard Council Station Prime," Thane continued. "You will face a combat simulation designed to test your tactical abilities, adaptability, and honor in battle. However, I must inform you of the restrictions." The alien's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement on a human face. "After witnessing countless devastating wars across the galaxy, the Council has banned all traditional weapons from the simulation. No energy weapons, no projectile weapons, no bladed weapons of any kind. The test must be completed using only your natural abilities and whatever materials you can find in the environment." Alex nodded slowly, his mind already working. "What kind of materials are we talking about?" "Civilian objects only. Tables, chairs, eating utensils, decorative items. Nothing that could be considered a weapon by any reasonable definition." Thane's scaled features arranged themselves into what was clearly meant to be a condescending smile. "I do hope your species won't find this too limiting. The last 7 species to attempt the trial failed rather spectacularly when they couldn't adapt to these ... peaceful restrictions." "I see," Alex said quietly. "And what happens if we fail?" "Your species will be placed under Galactic Protectorate status. You'll be provided with everything you need, but you'll have no say in galactic affairs. Think of it as a very comfortable prison." Thane's tone suggested he thought this was the most likely outcome. "The Council has found that primitive species often struggle with the concept of conflict resolution without violence." Alex almost laughed. Humans had been resolving conflicts without traditional weapons for centuries. Prison fights, bar brawls, schoolyard scraps, humans had elevated improvised combat to an art form, but he kept his expression neutral. "Who chooses?" "Our representative?" Alex asked. "Your government has already selected you, Commander Rivers. Your military record is quite impressive, though I wonder if your experience with primitive Earth conflicts will translate to a sophisticated galactic simulation." Thane's dismissive tone was getting under Alex's skin, but he maintained his composure. "When do I leave?" "Tomorrow. A council transport will arrive at your location at 0800 hours. I suggest you spend today preparing mentally for the challenge. Ahead, perhaps meditation would help you accept the limitations you'll face." The hologram flickered off, leaving Alex alone with his broken coffee machine and bent paperclip. He looked at the simple piece of metal in his hand, noting its weight, flexibility, and the sharp point where he'd bent it. In the right hands, a paperclip could pick locks, short-circuit electronics, or become a precise tool for accessing tight spaces. Alex spent the rest of the day researching everything he could find about the Galactic Council and the species that had attempted the trial. The information was limited, but patterns emerged. The Korathi were a proud warrior race who relied on advanced energy weapons. The Voidborn were crystalline beings who shaped matter with their thoughts. The Ethereals were gaseous creatures who barely interacted with physical objects at all. None of them seemed to understand the human concept of improvisation that evening. Alex packed a small bag with civilian clothes and personal items. He included a few everyday objects that might prove useful, a pen, some coins, a small mirror, and yes, the bent paperclip. Nothing that could be considered a weapon. But everything had potential in the right situation. The council transport arrived precisely on time. A sleek vessel that barely made a sound as it landed. The pilot was another Korathi who spoke in clipped, efficient phrases. The journey to Council Station Prime took 6 hours, during which Alex observed everything he could about alien technology and thinking patterns. The station itself was massive, a sprawling complex that housed millions of beings, from hundreds of species. Alex was given quarters in the diplomatic section and told he had 2 days to acclimatize before the trial. He spent those days exploring the public areas, watching how different species interacted with their environment. The Korathi used precision energy manipulators for everything, from opening doors to handling food. The Voidborn rarely touched anything directly, preferring to reshape objects with their mental abilities. The ethereals moved through specially designed atmospheric tubes that kept them separate from solid matter. None of them seemed to notice the simple metal spoon that came with Alex's meals. On the second day, Alex attended a formal dinner with various galactic dignitaries. The conversation was polite but condescending, with several species making barely veiled comments about human primitiveness. Alex smiled and nodded, all while testing the weight and balance of his eating utensils. The spoon was particularly interesting. It was made from some kind of advanced alloy that was lightweight but incredibly durable. The handle had just enough length for leverage, and the bowl was perfectly shaped for various applications. Alex had used similar utensils as improvised tools during his military service. Ambassador Thane approached during dessert, his reptilian features arranged in what Alex had learned was the Korathi version of a patronizing smile. "Nervous about tomorrow's trial, Commander? Perhaps your species should consider requesting additional preparation time. The simulation is quite sophisticated." Alex looked up from his meal, the spoon still in his hand. "What exactly makes it so challenging?" "The scenarios are designed to test advanced tactical thinking under severe limitations. Most species spend their time looking for weapons that aren't there, growing frustrated with the restrictions and eventually resorting to ineffective brute force." Thane's eye ridges arched with amusement. "The Council's combat scenarios require finesse, not primitive aggression." "Finesse," Alex repeated thoughtfully, turning the spoon over in his fingers. The metal caught the light and he could see his reflection in the polished surface. "I think I understand." "Do you? How refreshing." "Most humans I've encountered seem to think every problem can be solved with violence." Thane's tone was dismissive. "Tomorrow's trial will be quite educational for your species, I'm sure." Alex nodded politely, but his mind was already racing ahead to the possibilities. The spoon in his hand wasn't just an eating utensil, it was a tool, a weapon, a key to understanding how human ingenuity could overcome any limitation. Thane and the other aliens saw restrictions where Alex saw opportunities. The final evening before the trial, Alex lay in his quarters holding the spoon and thinking about everything he'd observed. The aliens had created a test designed to frustrate species who thought in terms of traditional weapons. But humans had been making weapons out of kitchen utensils since they lived in caves. Tomorrow, the Galactic Council would learn that banning weapons didn't eliminate the ability to wage war. It just made things more interesting. The alarm in Alex's quarters buzzed at 0600 hours, but he was already awake. Sleep had been impossible with his mind racing through tactical possibilities. He'd spent the night studying the spoon under the dim lighting, testing its flexibility, memorizing every curve and angle. By morning, the utensil felt like an extension of his hand. The trial wasn't scheduled until 1400 hours, giving Alex most of the day for final preparations. He requested permission to observe the station's civilian areas, claiming he wanted to understand the cultural context of the simulation. Ambassador Thane granted the request with obvious amusement. "By all means, Commander. Perhaps seeing how civilized species conduct themselves will help you appreciate the sophistication of today's test." The Korathi's scaled features rippled with condescension, though I doubt it will change the outcome. Alex began his reconnaissance in the commercial district. The station's marketplace was a wonder of galactic diversity, with vendors from dozens of species selling everything from exotic foods to advanced technology. But Alex wasn't interested in the exotic items. His trained eye cataloged the mundane objects that every species seemed to overlook. Food preparation tools hung from vendor stalls. Maintenance equipment lay scattered around construction sites. Decorative items adorned public spaces. Furniture filled seating areas. Every single object was a potential weapon in the right hands, but the aliens moved past them without a second glance. At a Korathi vendor's stall, Alex watched the merchant use an energy manipulator to arrange his wares. The device was precise and efficient, capable of handling multiple objects simultaneously. But when a small item fell behind the counter, the merchant stood there helplessly until a maintenance drone retrieved it. "Fascinating technology," Alex commented, approaching the stall. The merchant's eye ridges lifted with pride. "Third-generation precision manipulator. Can handle objects down to the molecular level. Far superior to primitive manual manipulation." "What happens if it breaks?" The merchant's expression faltered. "It doesn't break. Korathi technology is perfected over millennia of refinement." Alex nodded thoughtfully, but he'd already spotted 3 ways to disable the device using nothing more than a bent paperclip. The aliens had become so dependent on their advanced tools that they'd forgotten how to adapt. When those tools failed, his next stop was the dining areas, where he observed eating habits across species. The Voidborn didn't eat in any conventional sense. They absorbed energy directly from crystalline formations. The ethereals consumed gases through specialized breathing apparatus. The Korathi used their energy manipulators to process food into perfect geometric shapes before consuming it. Only a few species actually handled their food directly, and even they used specialized utensils designed for their particular physiology. Alex was probably the only being on the station who understood how to use a simple spoon as anything other than an eating implement. During lunch, Alex struck up conversations with various species, carefully probing their understanding of physical problem-solving. The results were revealing. Most galactic races had evolved past the need for improvisation. Their technology was so advanced that they'd lost the ability to think creatively about basic materials. Young Voidborn named Crystallin shared a table with Alex during the meal. Her translucent form shifted colors as she spoke, indicating emotional states that Alex was beginning to understand. "Your species fascinates me," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "You manipulate matter so directly, so primitively. How do you accomplish anything without proper tools?" Alex demonstrated by using his spoon to leverage open a stubborn food container that had been frustrating other diners. The simple application of physics drew stares from nearby tables. "We learn to see potential in everything around us," Alex explained. "When you don't have the perfect tool, you make do with what's available." Crystalline's form shifted to a confused purple. "But why not simply create the proper tool? Matter manipulation is a basic skill. Because sometimes the imperfect tool works better than the perfect one." Alex cleaned his spoon thoughtfully. "Adaptation is about more than just having the right equipment. It's about understanding how to use anything to solve any problem." The conversation continued for an hour, with Alex learning more about galactic thinking patterns. The various species had specialized to incredible degrees, but that specialization had cost them flexibility. They could perform miracles within their areas of expertise, but struggled with basic problem-solving outside those boundaries. After lunch, Alex visited the recreational areas where different species engaged in various forms of entertainment. The games were sophisticated, involving complex energy manipulations, mental challenges, and technological interfaces. But none of them required the kind of creative thinking that humans took for granted. Alex joined a puzzle-solving group where participants were given advanced tools to manipulate intricate three-dimensional structures. The other species used their specialized abilities with impressive skill, but they all approached the problems in predictable ways. When Alex solved the puzzle by wedging his spoon into a mechanism to create leverage, the group fell silent. "That's not how the puzzle is supposed to work," protested a Korathi participant. "But it worked," Alex pointed out. "The objective was to move the structure into the correct position. The method wasn't specified." The group exchanged glances that suggested they'd never considered alternative approaches. Their solutions were elegant and sophisticated, but they were also rigid and predictable. As the day progressed, Alex began to understand the true nature of the trial. The Galactic Council wasn't just testing combat ability, they were testing adaptability. The species that had failed weren't weak or stupid. They were simply too specialized to think outside their technological comfort zones. During his final reconnaissance trip, Alex visited the maintenance areas where station personnel worked to keep the massive structure operational. Here he found something interesting: emergency repair kits containing basic tools that any species could use. Hammers, wrenches, prying tools, and yes, simple metal implements that could serve multiple purposes. The maintenance workers were skilled at their jobs, but they followed established procedures with mechanical precision. When Alex asked about improvised repairs, they looked at him with confusion. "Why would we improvise?" asked a maintenance supervisor. "We have proper tools for every situation." "What if the proper tools aren't available?" The supervisor's expression suggested this was an incomprehensible concept. "Then we request the proper tools from supply." "What if supply is cut off?" "Then we wait for supply to be restored." Alex thanked the supervisor and continued his observation. The pattern was clear. Galactic civilization had eliminated uncertainty, risk, and the need for creative problem-solving. They'd created a perfect system that worked flawlessly within established parameters, but couldn't adapt when those parameters changed. By 1300 hours, Alex had seen enough. He returned to his quarters and spent the final hour before the trial in meditation, not to accept limitations as Ambassador Thane had suggested, but to clear his mind for the chaos ahead. The spoon lay on his desk, catching the light from the room's windows. Such a simple object, barely worth noticing by galactic standards. But Alex saw its potential: tool, weapon, key, lever, conductor, reflector, and a dozen other applications depending on the situation. The aliens had created a test designed to frustrate species who thought in terms of traditional weapons. But humans had never needed traditional weapons to be dangerous. They just needed to be creative. At 1350 hours, Alex made his way to the simulation chamber. The corridors were filled with aliens heading to the observation deck, their conversations a mix of excitement and anticipation. Most seemed to expect entertainment from humanity's inevitable failure. Alex smiled and patted the spoon in his pocket. The Galactic Council was about to learn that sometimes the most primitive solution was also the most effective. The simulation chamber hummed with energy as Alex stepped inside. The walls dissolved around him, replaced by a perfect replica of an ancient city that looked like something from Earth's medieval period. Stone buildings rose on either side of narrow streets, market stalls lined the central plaza, and holographic civilians moved about their daily business with convincing realism. Above him, the transparent ceiling showed hundreds of alien faces pressed against the observation deck. Alex could see Ambassador Thane in the front row, his scaled features arranged in anticipation of entertainment. Betting displays flickered throughout the crowd, showing odds heavily favored against human success. A disembodied voice filled the chamber, speaking in the formal tones of the Galactic Council. The trial will now begin. Objective: locate and neutralize 12 hostile combatants scattered throughout the simulation environment. Civilian casualties will result in immediate failure. Time limit 4 hours. Weapons restrictions remain in effect. Alex looked around the marketplace, noting the layout of buildings, the positioning of civilians, and the various objects scattered throughout the environment. Food stalls offered cooking implements, merchant stands displayed decorative items, and maintenance equipment sat near construction areas. He picked up a simple metal spoon from an overturned fruit cart. The weight felt familiar in his hand, a comfort anchor in the unfamiliar environment. Around him, holographic merchants continued their sales calls, completely unaware of the danger lurking in their simulation. The first enemy appeared 3 minutes later. Alex spotted movement on a rooftop across the plaza, a figure in advanced tactical gear scanning the area with sophisticated optics. The combatant was clearly non-human, with the elongated limbs and dual-jointed appendages of a voidborn. warrior, most species would have immediately begun searching for weapons or trying to approach the target directly. Alex did neither. Instead, he studied the building's architecture, noting the external plumbing systems, decorative ledges, and structural weak points. The spoon became his first tool. Wedged between two loose wall stones, it provided just enough leverage to reach the first handhold. The climb was silent and methodical, using techniques learned during urban warfare training on Earth. The advanced optics on the rooftop were designed to detect energy signatures and movement patterns, but they weren't calibrated for someone. Moving with deliberate stealth, Alex reached the roof level and paused. The enemy combatant was positioned near the edge, focused on the plaza below. The warrior's equipment included an energy shield generator, a non-lethal stunning weapon, and advanced communication gear. All of it was useless against an attack from an unexpected angle. The spoon's handle found the precise nerve cluster at the base of the warrior's neck. The Voidborn collapsed silently, their crystalline form going dark as consciousness fled. Alex relieved them of the energy shield generator and communications equipment, then used the spoon to disable the stunning weapon by shorting a specific circuit. From the observation deck came the first murmur of surprise. The betting displays flickered as odds began to shift slightly. Alex climbed down into the plaza and began moving through the narrow streets. The second enemy appeared in an alley between two buildings. This one, a Karathi warrior with scale mail armor and advanced scanning equipment. The alien was methodically checking doorways and windows, following standard search patterns, but Alex wasn't hiding in doorways or windows. He was above, having used the spoon to access the building's drainage system. The metal implement served as a perfect conductor, allowing him to short-circuit the building's lighting system and create shadows where none had existed before. The Karathi warrior's scanning equipment detected energy fluctuations but couldn't pinpoint their source. As the alien moved deeper into the alley, Alex dropped behind him. The spoon's bowl, applied with precise pressure to the warrior's temple, induced immediate unconsciousness. 2 down, 10 to go. The third and fourth enemies were working together, positioned at opposite ends of a covered bridge that spanned a canal. They had clear sight lines across the entire area, making approach impossible through conventional means. Alex studied the situation from a concealed position. Noting the bridge's construction and the water flow beneath it, the spoon became a precision tool as Alex worked on the bridge's support mechanisms. Not to destroy the structure, but to create controlled stress points that would cause specific movements. A bent support here, a loosened joint there, and the bridge developed a barely noticeable sway. Alex then used the spoon to redirect water flow from a decorative fountain, increasing the pressure in the canal below. The combination of structural stress and water pressure created a resonance effect that made the bridge vibrate at a specific frequency. The two enemy combatants found themselves dealing with motion sickness as the bridge's movement affected their inner ear balance. In their disorientation, they never saw Alex climb up from the canal below. Using the spoon to create handholds in the stone supports, both warriors were unconscious within seconds, victims of the same nerve strike technique that had proven so effective. The observation deck was no longer quiet. Excited conversations filled the air as aliens tried to understand what they were witnessing. The betting displays showed dramatic swings in odds, but most species still couldn't comprehend the tactical principles at work. Alex moved deeper into the simulation, his confidence growing with each success. The remaining enemies would be more challenging, but the pattern was clear. The simulation was designed to test adaptation under artificial constraints, and humans had been adapting to artificial constraints for millennia. The fifth enemy was a technological specialist, hidden in a building filled with advanced equipment. The warrior had multiple detection systems, automated defenses, and backup communications. A direct assault would be suicide, and stealth seemed impossible with so many sensors active. Alex spent 20 minutes studying the building's infrastructure through windows and vents. The spoon became a diagnostic tool, testing electrical systems, water pressure, and structural integrity. The building was a marvel of galactic engineering, but it was also dependent on complex interactions between multiple systems. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Alex used the spoon to create a series of minor adjustments to the building's environmental controls. A blocked air vent here, a redirected water line there, and a carefully placed electrical short in the main distribution panel. The cascading system failures created exactly the right conditions. Temperature fluctuations caused metal expansion that triggered structural stress alarms. Water pressure variations activated emergency drainage systems. Electrical fluctuations brought backup power online, overloading circuits and creating electromagnetic interference. In the chaos of system failures, the technological specialists' advanced equipment became a liability. Sensors provided contradictory readings. Automated defenses targeted false positives, and communications were jammed by the building's own electronic systems. Alex entered through a service tunnel that had been overlooked in the confusion. The enemy warrior was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by malfunctioning equipment and trying to restore order to the chaos. The spoon handle found its mark with practiced precision. The specialist joined his companions in unconsciousness. 5 down, 7 to go. The observation deck was now filled with animated discussions. Ambassador Thane's expression had shifted from condescension to something approaching concern. The betting displays showed that some species were beginning to place money on human success. Alex emerged from the building and assessed his situation. The simulation had been running for 43 minutes, and he'd eliminated nearly half the enemy force, without sustaining any injuries or causing civilian casualties. The remaining combatants would be the most difficult, positioned in defensible locations and alert to the threat he represented, but Alex was just getting started. The spoon in his hand had already proven its versatility as a tool, weapon, and problem-solving implement. The aliens had created a test designed to frustrate species who thought in terms of traditional combat. But humans had never needed traditional weapons to be dangerous. The Galactic Council was about to learn that sometimes the most primitive solution was also the most effective. And Alex was just beginning to show them what human ingenuity could accomplish with nothing more than a simple eating utensil. The sixth enemy proved to be the most challenging yet. Alex found her positioned in a clock tower at the center of the simulation, with clear sight lines in all directions and multiple escape routes. The warrior was clearly experienced, moving in unpredictable patterns and using advanced camouflage technology that made her nearly invisible. Alex spent 15 minutes observing from concealment, noting the warrior's behavior patterns and equipment. She was using some kind of adaptive camouflage that shifted to match her surroundings, making direct visual detection almost impossible. Her weapon was a precision stunning device that could incapacitate targets at long range. The spoon became Alex's solution to the camouflage problem. Positioned carefully to catch sunlight from a nearby window, the polished metal surface created a makeshift mirror that allowed him to observe the tower from multiple angles simultaneously. The warrior's camouflage was nearly perfect, but it couldn't account for the subtle distortions visible in reflected light. Once he'd identified the movement patterns, Alex began his approach. The tower's ancient architecture included external, decorative elements that provided climbing opportunities, but the warrior's position commanded all conventional routes. Alex needed a different approach. He used the spoon to access the tower's internal mechanisms. The simulation had replicated the building down to functional details, including the clockwork that operated the massive timepiece. A few precise adjustments to the gear ratios, and the clock began keeping different time. The change was subtle but effective. The warrior's internal chronometer, synchronized with the building's systems, began providing incorrect time references. Her movement patterns, based on precisely timed intervals, slowly shifted out of phase with her actual position. Alex climbed the tower during one of these displaced intervals, when the warrior thought she was facing east but was actually facing north. The spoon handle found the nerve cluster at the base of her neck before she realized her mistake. 6 down, 6 to go. The 7th and 8th enemies were positioned in a narrow alley with civilians present. They had taken defensive positions behind market stalls, using the innocent bystanders as human shields. A direct assault would result in civilian casualties and immediate failure. Alex studied the situation from a rooftop overlooking the alley. The enemy positions were well chosen, with overlapping fields of fire and minimal exposure. The civilians were clearly terrified, but couldn't flee without entering the line of fire. The solution required understanding both the physics of the environment and the psychology of the combatants. Alex used the spoon to make minute adjustments to the building's water and heating systems. The changes created temperature differentials that caused air currents to flow in specific patterns. These air currents carried sound in predictable ways, allowing Alex to create acoustic illusions. By timing his movements with the airflow patterns, he could make sounds appear to come from different directions than their actual source. The enemy combatants found themselves responding to threats that seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. Their defensive positions became liabilities as they turned to face dangers that weren't there, exposing their flanks to the actual threat. Alex moved through the alley like a ghost, using the acoustic camouflage to mask his approach. The spoon disabled both warriors with the same nerve strike technique, and the civilians were freed without injury. 8 down, 4 to go. The 9th enemy was a technological specialist who had barricaded himself in a building's basement with multiple automated defenses. Sensors covered every approach, and the single entrance was protected by energy barriers and stunning devices. But Alex had learned something important about galactic technology during his reconnaissance. The aliens had created systems that were incredibly sophisticated within their design parameters, but vulnerable to unexpected inputs. The spoon became a precision instrument as Alex worked on the building's electrical systems. Not to disable them, but to introduce harmonic frequencies that created interference patterns in the automated defenses. The sensors began registering false positives, the energy barriers fluctuated unpredictably, and the stunning devices targeted empty air. In the confusion, Alex entered through a service tunnel that the defenses hadn't been programmed to monitor. The enemy specialist was standing in the center of his technological fortress, surrounded by malfunctioning equipment and trying to restore order to the chaos. The spoon handle ended the specialist's involvement in the trial with the same precision that had worked 8 times before. 9 down, 3 to go. The 10th and 11th enemies were working together in a coordinated patrol, moving through the simulation with military precision. They had established communication protocols, mutual support positions, and backup procedures for various contingencies. Alex observed their patterns for 10 minutes, noting the timing of their movements and the blind spots in their coverage. The patrol was professionally executed, but it was also predictable. Military precision was a strength against conventional threats, but it became a weakness against unconventional tactics. The spoon became a tool for creating systematic confusion. Alex used it to leave subtle signs of his presence in locations where the patrol had already searched. A barely visible scratch on a wall here, a displaced object there, and tiny modifications to the environment that suggested someone had passed through recently. The patrol began second-guessing their own procedures. They started searching areas they'd already cleared, double-checking positions they'd already secured, and questioning the accuracy of their own observations. While they were distracted by the phantom evidence, Alex approached from their most secure flank. The spoon disabled both warriors in quick succession, their military training useless against an attack they hadn't anticipated. 11 down, 1 to go. The final enemy was the most challenging of all. The warrior had observed the fate of his companions and adapted his tactics accordingly. He was moving unpredictably, avoiding established patterns, and using advanced detection equipment to scan for the kind of environmental manipulations that had proven so effective. Alex found him in the simulation's central plaza, surrounded by civilians and positioned where any direct approach would be impossible. The warrior was clearly experienced and intelligent, having learned from the mistakes of his fallen comrades, but Alex had been learning too. The spoon had proven its versatility as a tool, weapon, and problem-solving implement throughout the trial. Now it was time to demonstrate its most important application. As a symbol of human adaptability, Alex stepped into the plaza in full view of the final enemy. The warrior immediately raised his stunning weapon, but Alex was already moving. Not to attack, but to demonstrate something that no galactic species had ever learned. The spoon became a conductor, a reflector, a lever, and a precision instrument, all within the space of seconds. Alex used it to redirect sunlight into the warrior's eyes, create acoustic feedback from the stunning weapon, and manipulate the plaza's environmental systems to create a localized dust storm in the chaos. The final enemy fired his weapon repeatedly, but Alex was no longer where the shots were aimed. He moved through the confusion like water, using the spoon to create handholds, clear obstacles, and maintain his balance on surfaces that shouldn't have been walkable. The warriors advanced. Equipment was useless against an opponent who refused to behave according to established tactical principles. His detection systems couldn't track someone who was using the environment itself as camouflage. The final confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. The spoon handle found its mark one last time, and the warrior joined his 11 companions. In unconsciousness, 12 down, 0 to go. The simulation chamber fell silent as the holographic environment began to fade. Alex stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by unconscious enemies and uncivilians, holding nothing more than a simple metal spoon. The observation deck erupted in chaos, as hundreds of alien species tried to comprehend what they'd witnessed. The betting displays showed complete confusion, with odds fluctuating wildly as species struggled to understand the implications of human success. Alex looked up at the transparent ceiling where Ambassador Thane's expression had shifted from condescension to something approaching awe. The trial had lasted exactly 1 hour and 17 minutes, making it the fastest completion in galactic history, but the real lesson wasn't about speed or efficiency. It was about the fundamental difference between human and galactic approaches to problem solving. The aliens had created a test designed to frustrate species who thought in terms of traditional weapons. But humans had never needed traditional weapons to be dangerous. The Galactic Council was about to learn that sometimes the most primitive solution was also the most effective. And Alex was just beginning to show them what human ingenuity could accomplish when properly motivated. Silence filled the observation deck as the simulation chamber powered down. Alex stood motionless in the center of the fading holographic plaza, 12 unconscious enemies scattered around him, 0 civilian casualties, and nothing in his hand but a simple metal spoon. The betting displays had frozen entirely, their algorithms unable to process what had just occurred. Ambassador Thane's voice crackled through the chamber's communication system, but the usual condescension was gone. Commander Rivers, the Council requires an immediate explanation. Our sensors detected no weapons usage, no violation of restrictions, and yet you completed a trial that has defeated every other species for the past 3 centuries. Alex looked up at the hundreds of alien faces pressed against the observation deck's transparent walls. Some showed confusion, others amazement, and a few displayed what might have been fear. He held up the spoon, its polished surface catching the chamber's lighting. You asked me to complete a combat trial without weapons. This isn't a weapon, it's a tool. Humans have been using tools for over 2 million years. The difference between us and every other species you've tested is that we never stop seeing the potential in everything around us. A new voice joined the conversation, ancient and commanding. Counselor Aegis, the eldest member of the Galactic Council, spoke from the observation deck's highest tier. In 10,000 years of administering this trial, no species has completed it in under 2 hours. Most fail entirely. You have not only succeeded but demonstrated tactical thinking that challenges our fundamental understanding of combat. Alex nodded respectfully. With respect, Counselor, you made a critical error in your assessment. You assumed that by outlawing weapons, you had eliminated the ability to wage war. But humans don't need weapons to be dangerous. We just need to be creative. The observation deck buzzed with translations as species struggled to comprehend the concept, Alex continued, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's audio system. Every species that attempted this trial before us probably looked for weapons because that's how you think about conflict. You have energy blasters, so you look for energy blasters. You have plasma swords, so you look for plasma swords. You have matter manipulators, so you look for matter manipulators. He paused, letting the words sink in. But humans have been making weapons out of rocks, sticks, and kitchen utensils since we lived in caves. A younger alien voice called out from the crowd. But how did you know what to do? Our combat specialists design scenarios that should be impossible to solve without proper equipment. Alex smiled, remembering his military training on Earth. Your specialists design scenarios based on how galactic species think. They create challenges that require specific tools, advanced technology, and established tactical doctrines. But humans learned to solve problems with whatever materials were available. We didn't have the luxury of perfect tools, so we got creative. He walked to the edge of the chamber, still holding the spoon. This simple utensil served as a climbing tool, a lockpick, a mirror for reconnaissance, a lever for mechanical advantage, a conductor for electrical manipulation, a precision instrument for pressure point strikes, and a dozen other applications, depending on what the situation required. Ambassador Thane's scaled features had gone pale, but that's impossible. A single tool cannot serve so many functions effectively. That's where you're wrong. Alex's voice carried the confidence of someone who had just proven the impossible. The tool doesn't determine the function. The user does. You've spent millennia perfecting specialized equipment for specific purposes, but you've forgotten the most important principle of all, adaptation. From the observation deck came the sound of rapid chittering, the Karathi equivalent of nervous laughter. Other species joined in with their own expressions of unease. The implications of what they'd witnessed were beginning to sink in. Counselor. Aegis spoke again, his ancient voice heavy with concern. Commander Rivers, your species has demonstrated capabilities that we did not anticipate. This trial was designed to test worthiness for galactic citizenship, but you have revealed something far more significant. What's that, Counselor? You have shown us that our understanding of warfare, problem-solving, and tactical thinking has been fundamentally limited by our own assumptions. The Elder's admission sent ripples of shock through the gathered species. We have been testing candidates based on our own evolutionary biases, never considering that intelligence might manifest in forms we cannot recognize. Alex nodded thoughtfully. Every species up here evolved along different paths, developed different technologies, different ways of thinking, but somehow you all ended up in the same place, dependent on advanced tools and rigid thinking patterns. Humans took a different route. A crystalline void-born voice rang out from the crowd. But surely your approach has limitations. What happens when you encounter a problem that cannot be solved with improvisation? Then we improvise better tools? Alex replied simply. Or we change our approach to the problem. Or we accept that some problems can't be solved and work around them instead. Flexibility isn't just about using different tools, it's about thinking differently. The betting displays finally came back online, but instead of showing odds for the trial's outcome, they were calculating the economic implications of human membership in the Galactic Council. The numbers were staggering. Ambassador Thane found his voice again, though it trembled with uncertainty. The Council will need time to process these results. Your species has exceeded all expectations in ways that we that no one could have predicted. There's something else you should probably know, Alex said quietly. What's that, Commander? Alex looked down at the simple metal spoon in his hand, then back up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. This was just a spoon. You should see what we can do with a paperclip. The observation deck erupted in chaos. Species that had never shown emotion were gesticulating wildly. Betting systems crashed as algorithms tried to calculate unknowable variables. Emergency council sessions were being called in a dozen languages simultaneously. Through it all, Alex stood calmly in the center of the chamber, holding his spoon and watching the galactic order reassess everything they thought they knew about intelligence, warfare, and the nature of civilization itself. An hour later, Alex sat in a private conference room with the senior members of the Galactic Council. The atmosphere was tense, with several species looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Counselor Aegis led the discussion, his ancient features grave with concern. Commander Rivers, we must ask, what are your species' intentions regarding galactic membership? Alex considered the question carefully. We want what any species wants. Security for our world, opportunities for our people, and the chance to contribute to something larger than ourselves. And if other species view humanity as a threat, then they'll learn what humans do when threatened. Alex's tone remained calm, but the implication was unmistakable. We prefer cooperation, but we're very good at conflict resolution when necessary. The council members exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to understand the full scope of their situation. They hadn't just approved a new member species. They'd awakened something that had been better left sleeping. Counselor. Aegis spoke slowly, choosing his words with extreme care. The Council hereby grants humanity full membership status, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. However, we feel it necessary to implement certain guidelines regarding the application of human problem-solving techniques in galactic affairs. Alex raised an eyebrow. What kind of guidelines? Perhaps we could establish protocols for the use of improvised tactical applications, safety standards for creative tool usage, training programs to help other species understand human thinking. Patterns? The counselor was clearly making this up as he went along, trying to find some way to manage an unmanageable situation. You're trying to regulate human ingenuity, Alex observed with amusement. We're trying to prevent galactic civilization from collapsing when every other species realizes they've been thinking about everything wrong for the past 50,000 years. Ambassador Thane interjected, his composure finally cracking. Alex stood and placed the spoon on the conference table. The simple metal utensil sat there innocuously, looking like nothing more than an eating implement. But everyone in the room now understood its true significance. Counselor, with respect, you can't regulate creativity. You can't put limits on adaptation. And you definitely can't control what humans will think of next. Alex moved toward the door, then paused. But you don't need to worry about us disrupting galactic civilization. Why not? Aegis asked. Because we're going to help you rebuild it properly. As Alex left the conference room, he could hear the emergency session beginning behind him. The Galactic Council was about to discover that approving human membership was the easy part. The hard part would be figuring out what to do with a species that could turn anything into a weapon and any problem into an opportunity, deep in space. Earth received a priority transmission, diplomatic status approved. Welcome to the Galactic Council. Please stand by for updated regulations regarding improvised tactical applications of civilian objects. The message was signed by 12 different species and included a footnote that would become legendary in human history. Note, request immediate. Consultation on defensive applications of common household items, urgent, send help. The age of human ingenuity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.